Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
And now, back to the man who's never afraid to throw virtual hands, the social media samurai, the tyrant of Twitter, the keyboard snatcher of souls, Tim Graham and friends.
The stage is set for the 2016 Buffalo Bills season with the release of their schedule, and the stage may be set for the end of the Buffalo Sabres. Yeah, go ahead.
Save the Lindy Ruff part because that I might have a way to seeg into that.
Okay.
If you can.
All right, here we go. The stage has been set for the Buffalo Bills 2016 season as the schedule has been released for the upcoming year, and the stage may be set for the Buffalo Sabres playoff exit as they are on the verge of elimination, heading back to Montreal for Game 6. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus, and this is Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. And of course, our partnership with Homage has been a success, and we thank you all for supporting Tim Graham and Friends through this partnership. To do it, if you haven't already, just click on the link that's in the comments or in the social media feed. I put it in there. It takes you to Homage, where you get all kinds of discounts, whether it be bundling, sales that are already in place. You get TGAF, special whatevers, and you go and check out the site, fill up your cart, and as long as you stay on the site from that link that is in the comments, you are supporting Tim Graham and Friends. So thanks to everybody out there who've already done that. They have a ton of stuff. I am with my Topps Stadium Club shirt today. This is the baseball version. I would go with the basketball too. I was a big Stadium Club guy back when Shaq and Alonzo Mourning were rookies. I used to buy those by the box. Not so much anymore, but anyway, Topps Stadium Club, I'm going with that. Homage, you got the brand here. Jonah is wearing his WIVB Channel 4 branded material. I don't believe that Homage has a partnership with WIVB that you could buy anything there, but they do have licensing with MLB, the NFL, ton of Bill stuff. In fact, a little late to the game, but the satin starter jacket had just sold out. I was going to link to that. It was already set like 70% off. They've sold off. You would have gotten whatever breaks on that. NBA, WNBA, NCAA, Major League Soccer, Topps, starter I've already mentioned, The Simpsons, video games, Negro Leagues, all kinds of stuff. Check it out. Just go browse that site. You're bound to find something that you love. Disney, Marvel, DC, all that stuff. Okay.
Now, do these Topps t-shirts smell like stale bubble gum?
Well, Well, that the one I wore last week should, because that did include gum. Stadium Club did not have gum in it. This was a high quality product. Well, still is. I think they still do make Stadium Club high gloss cards. In fact, I bought just for fun. I bought a box of the original Series 2 Stadium Club baseball. Um, Maybe a couple of years ago, I picked up a box for $20. I'm like, why are these so inexpensive? Because there's some great cards in here. Some Hall of Fame rookies. I think Jeff Bagwell's in there, and of course you got all kinds of the stars of the day, and those are again high quality card that they go for a couple of bucks. And I realized it when I opened a couple of packs. The gloss, they use so much gloss on these cards that over time they fuse together, and you have these like a brick. So you open up the pack of cards and you have to peel them apart. So you don't really get the quality isn't there anymore. But anyway, that's if you've left your top Stadium Club cards unopened for 30 years. Jonah, the Buffalo Bills schedule came out last night, but the Sabres are on the brink of elimination. Just a media observation. I was watching one of the local news organizations today at their afternoon news, and the first two stories to lead off the entire newscast were the Bills moving from WGR to 97 Rock. That was the lead story. The number two story was the Bills schedule release. And then the number three story was the Sabres lost last night. They're on the brink of elimination from the postseason. So even when things are special in the world of the Sabres, they still always seem to take a back seat to whatever's going on with the Bills. But let's start with the Sabres here on this podcast, as it should be. You were there at the game last night, Jonah, at KeyBank Center. It started off great. It started off wild. It started off entertaining, and then just fell apart to the point where, the three big character guys that the Sabres were most in love with, I think, entering the playoffs, Tage Thompson, Olympic gold medalist, and best player on the ice, leading scorer. I don't want to say best player on the ice, but at least best offensive player. Tage Thompson, the first one to dare say that we are playing for Stanley Cups, and made Bills fans, or excuse me, Sabres fans get the vapors and need their fainting couch when Alex Tuck started talking not about just making the playoffs, but going for a Stanley Cup. And then Rasmus Dahlin, the Masterton Trophy finalist, and one of the great inspirational stories in the NHL this year. Sabres fans are left wondering, where have these three guys been aside from committing penalties and, yes, accidental goals and points and things like that. But these are the three guys who should be carrying your team, not being dragged by Zach Benson and Shane Doan and Alex Lyon through the first couple of rounds.
Yeah, Tage Thompson is a -9 in the series. Alex Tuck is a -8 in the series. They're not playing well. They're getting outplayed by Montreal's top line. I think that's probably been the story of the series, or at least one of the biggest storylines in the series, is that Montreal's top guys and their top line have been better and faster than the Sabres, and that the Sabres haven't really been able to match that game or influence the way the Canadians play to make it a different style of game. That when the Sabres were able to be the faster, younger, more agile, swifter team against Boston, that they were able to take control of that series, but playing a team that's their equal or better in that regard, the Sabres haven't been able to tilt the ice in their favor in any way. The penalties, Tage Thompson, in more than one occasion in this series, has taken a really bad penalty in the offensive zone that has led to a power play goal and stolen momentum away from the Sabres. I mean, it started well for the Sabres last night. They got 3 goals in the first 10 minutes. Konsta Helenus, in his second playoff game after being, a positive factor in his first playoff game, got his first playoff goal, youngest Sabre skater to score in a playoff game since Pierre Turgeon in 1989. Even though the Sabres did let 2 get back into the net on their own end in that first period, coming out of that period, they looked to be in pretty good shape.
You had to wonder, at least I did, for a few seconds after that third goal, is Dobish coming out of the game? Like,
Right.
is it
Yeah.
time for Dobish to maybe get a mental rest?
Yes. And that might have been a key moment for Montreal in turning around the game, and that they stuck with him and he played well for the rest of the game, didn't let in another goal, stopped Tage Thompson on a grade A chance. It really seemed to give Montreal momentum. Also, the Sabres goaltending degraded and their defense degraded as the game went along, and they gave up the lead and then fell back down further and further. In between periods, there were a lot of Buffalo media members booking their flights and travel to Carolina. They seemed to think when that schedule came out of when the games would be based on certain, whether this series ended in 6 or 7 games, with the Sabres winning after that first period, they looked to be favored maybe to pull out this series and move on to the next round. And, hopefully they got trip insurance cancellation and able to at least pause those travel plans, uh, unlike the Bills' scheduled travel plans that everybody was kind of working through yesterday. So the Sabres are trailing in the series. They're not playing well on home ice. I think that's been the big storyline of the playoffs so far. They're 2-4 at KeyBank Center and 4-1 on the road. If that trend carries over into Game 6, that might favor the Sabres in forcing this into a Game 7 at home, but then is a Game 7 on home ice an advantage or not? Lindy Ruff even said they'll treat it like a road game, but we'll see. I think for the fans and the Sabres culture and the energy and the buzz, a Game 7 in Buffalo on Monday when I think the high is supposed to be 80-something degrees, high 80s, could really be a fun day. I think even Game 6 with this watch party at the arena, 10,000 plus fans going to be there for that, and some, activities in the concourses. That's kind of fun. I'm still in the mode of, yeah,
Well,
maybe the Sabres.
I'm not 100% sure with that, Jonah. That's at the arena, inside the arena.
Yeah, there's going to be
Well,
a
that's
watch
cool
party for
because it's
Game
supposed to
6 at
rain, I
KeyBank
think.
Center.
So that's good
Yep.
that they're not going to be stuck out there trying to huddle under
Yeah.
the Skyway overpass.
Right, and only $5 general admission. They're expecting, I think, at least 9 or 10,000 people. I think they might get more with the rain and different things going on. I'm not sure exactly, but I think face painting, hair
Cool.
braiding, stuff like that. I think that'll be fun for a lot of Sabres fans. And I'm still of the mode that, this team hasn't been in the playoffs in 15 years, and this was a really fun season. They won a playoff round. They're extending the series at least to 6 games, and if they can get to 7 and a home Game 7, even if the Sabres don't advance, they don't go to the Stanley Cup Finals, they don't contend for the ultimate prize in the sport, that this was a really fun, exciting, memorable season, and even the playoff run in 2 competitive series. Not all of the games have been competitive, but many of them have been. Sabres did get 2 exciting wins in this series, and maybe they can get a third one, maybe they can get a fourth one. But I wouldn't be too disappointed, even though it is disappointing the way they played and the way this series is going so far. I wouldn't be too disappointed in what the Sabres have done this spring and this second half of the season. And I think back to what I believe is the last time we recorded a podcast, and I was sitting here in one of the secondary studios at WIVB, and I think it was right after Kevin Adams had been fired and Jarmo Kekalainen had been promoted, and we talked a lot about Lindy Ruff being on thin ice and whether he was going to be
Right.
coaching his last game very soon after, and it did feel that way and seem that way. And there were leaks and reports that Lindy Ruff wouldn't be the coach much longer. Then the Sabres continued a win streak that they were already on, but went on to have that 10-game win streak and be the best team in hockey after December 9th and win the Atlantic Division and have, I think, one of the top 5 records in Sabres history and be the number 2 seed in these playoffs and get the home ice advantage for the first 2 rounds, which hasn't been much of an advantage, but I think it's been good for the fans to have those extra home playoff games and to start these series at home. So just to think about how far the Sabres have come within the past few months and within this season, and Lindy Ruff deserves a lot of credit for that. He's a finalist for the Jack Adams Award, and I think should be the favorite to win that award. But you also wonder, and maybe you can speak more on this, if Saturday or Monday or whenever this series ends or whenever the Sabres playoff run ends, Lindy Ruff is not under contract for next year yet. Could this be the last game that Lindy Ruff coaches or the last series of games that Lindy Ruff coaches the Buffalo Sabres?
Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility, and it makes sense. And now you may hear that and say, "Well, he's only 60. What? How old is he? 66? 60? Let me double check.
I think, yeah, mid 60s. I'd have to look it up. I was going to say 64.
He's 66. Okay. So 66 years old. That is not ancient today. and he still seems to have some coaching maneuvers to make. He's done a pretty amazing job, I think, in juggling lines, his goaltenders, making moves. He's again just doing what he did from December 9th on, the whole record that you mentioned and referenced, one of the greatest feats in hockey history, one of the greatest feats and one of the greatest seasons in Buffalo sports history, given all the context. That you would say this guy clearly still has a lot to give the game, but does he have it in him to do it? We don't know. He refuses to talk about it. He won't talk about his contract. He won't even talk about or acknowledge practically that he is a finalist for the Jack Adams. And we're looking at a potential Hall of Fame coach, a guy who is matched only by Connie Mack and George Hallis as coaches who have taken their teams, the same team, to the playoffs in 4 different decades. And that's a pretty incredible thing to even say as those words are coming out of your mouth. You know, Connie Mack and George Hallis, and then Lindy Ruff. Now, granted, he's never won the championship, but he is the all-time winningest NHL coach without a Stanley Cup. And again, to do what he did this year was just short of miraculous. It would be a great way to end your career as a Jack Adams winner and having accomplished such a great feat as ending the 14-year playoff drought, looking as though it was absolutely going to be 15 straight years. Nobody would have believed it at the time when the Sabres fired Kevin Adams that this was going to happen. And I think that you just wonder what he has in him, what he wants to do. And of course, we don't really know. The competitor in him, he's always wanted to win a Stanley Cup for Buffalo. To get this close, maybe that spurs him to want to keep trying. Again, I'm not even inferring that he might have one foot out the door. But if he doesn't want to continue, this is a great way to end your career. I think he could look at it and say, this is a nice way to end it on my terms and not having somebody else move on from me or getting fired if things, don't work out midway into next season or the season after that. He can look back and reflect on this job that he did coming to Buffalo's rescue after the Don Granato, Kevin Adams regime and getting them over the hump and putting that would be, I'm sure, quite satisfying for Lindy Ruff to do. Of course, he would love the Stanley Cup. It doesn't look like it. First off, they got to win 2 games against the Canadiens to advance. Carolina Hurricanes look like the superior team. They've been sitting there resting and waiting. And then the Colorado Avalanche look like even a more talented team than that. So, of course, they have to get past the Vegas Golden Knights, to put it as the way the NHL wants it. And but it's going to be a long. I'm just reiterating the same point over again. It would be barring a Stanley Cup, it would be one of the most incredible seasons to end your career on.
Yes, and it might be difficult to top it next season. But I think that's where you need to get into the mind of Lindy Ruff, where he hasn't said any of this. He hasn't really strongly indicated any of this. My inference is that he's not done and that he doesn't have one foot out the door, or he isn't thinking about retirement or riding out into the sunset. But he's really said nor hinted at anything that makes this a strong belief. But I think if Lindy Ruff thinks that this team can win the Stanley Cup next year or contend for the Stanley Cup next year, I think he wants to finish that job. It was stated when he was hired 2 years ago that his job was to get this team back to the playoffs, to end the drought, to lift that black cloud from the franchise and restore this team to a winning organization. I think there was a lot of belief when he signed that 2-year contract that this would be a 2-year arrangement, and maybe he'd hand the team off to Seth Appert or another assistant coach or someone he was grooming. But I don't really believe that Seth Appert is that coach anymore. Without Kevin Adams as the general manager, that changes that dynamic. I don't think there is the type of coach on the bench right now for Lindy Ruff to hand off the team to and move up in the organization.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
that was the
really,
plan when this whole thing
yeah,
started. And Seth Appert, I mean, maybe he's a better head coach than he is a power play technician, but the biggest Achilles heel that the Sabres have had, I think, all season is Seth Appert's responsibility. That's tough to sell, I think, to a fan base
yeah. Yeah, and so I do
and your
believe
team,
that
the
if
players,
if
probably.
if Lindy Ruff believes in this group, the core group that they have coming back, they have under contract that they expect to have back next year, whoever they maybe can add to the group or bring up through the farm system, or a player like Yuri Kulik, who's been on injured reserve all season, but presumably would be back on the team next year, if they think they can be even better or just as good and have the same type of opportunity that they had, at least record and seating wise, going into next season. I do believe Lindy Ruff wants to keep striving towards that. I think that's his ultimate goal with the Buffalo Sabres, going back to when he played in the 80s and coached this team in the 90s and early 2000s, and maybe get back to that moment, the precipice of a championship they were on in 1999, and try to have one more crack at winning that cup. But yeah, and I think
Well, how
Lindy
about,
Ruff would want to come back. One more point.
yeah, yeah.
He has 950 career regular season wins. That's close enough to 1,000, I think, for a coach to want to come back, try for
Might
another
need 2 years
50-win
for that,
season.
though.
Might
That's
need
like a
two
2 year
years for
commitment.
that, but they won 51 games this year. So if he thinks this team can be just as good or even better, that might be something to strive for next year. I think there's a different conversation to have about maybe Jarmo Kekalainen and the Sabres organization going in a different direction. But I think with the year that they had and the popularity Lindy Ruff has and the Sabres hockey culture and living here in Western New York, I don't think the Sabres should make that move. But maybe you give Lindy Ruff a new contract and are quick to pull the plug at a later date. But I seem to think you run it back with the same coaching staff, and I think Lindy Ruff is on board for that. But maybe at his age, or something about the lifestyle, if there's something about it we don't know, maybe he'll surprise us later on, and maybe that's why he doesn't have a contract extension yet.
But here's another thing that I've thought of, and that's Lindy Ruff being close to the vest regarding his future, his contract, even like I said, the Jack Adams accolade, not wanting to talk about it. We don't know if he's talking to the Sabres about it. Maybe he's already told them this is going to be it for me. We don't know. Or maybe he hasn't told them anything. And Lindy Ruff, smart man that he is, I could also see this is leverage for him. What are you going to do to improve this team? You want me to come back? My contract's up. I don't have to come back. Are you going to get me a number one goaltender that I can rely on 3 games out of 4, 4 games out of 5, whatever it is? Give me a workhorse goaltender that I don't have to guess if he's in the groove, if he needs a night off, if we ride him, the alternating, all that stuff. I think that especially anybody who is waiting to see what UPL is made of, is this guy going to develop into the goalie we've all hoped over the years? We see the flashes, we see it here and there when he's not dealing with injuries, the greatness that we would see on occasion, but the inconsistency never went away. And then we get him into some crucial moments, and maybe his head's not entirely in the game with that, the terrible goal in which he got pulled against Boston. And then last night against the Canadiens, some of those were tough, but I think that you look at this and say, I think the sample size is big enough for UPL that waiting for this guy or hoping that next year's playoffs, then he'll really be sharpened. He'll have that much more experience. He will have evolved that much more, gotten that much better or different coaching or whatever. I think that that's risky. And Alex Lyon, same thing. As much as everybody loves the job that he was able to do against the Bruins to get the the Sabres into the second round of the playoffs. Okay, granted, fantastic effort. Had it continued, Conn Smythe caliber, but he's shown, and at his age, this is who Alex Lyon is. He can't go on incredible streaks to the point if he could, then he wouldn't be the Sabres backup for much of the season. He would have stuck as somebody else's number one by now. But anyways, it's just a thought. If Lindy says, I need you to apply what I want for this team if you want me back, is not something that sounds absurd to me.
Well, and there's also the simple leverage of Lindy Ruff's contract and his salary and his assistant coaches. You know, it very much seemed like Kevin Adams had a heavy influence in who the assistant coaching staff was when Lindy Ruff came in here 2 years
Right.
ago. Lindy Ruff has made it seem like he was totally on board with the way the staff was put together and who his assistants are, but maybe going forward, he has some different ideas or wants more say, more control. Also, Jarmo Kekalainen being a different general manager with different ideas of who should be on the assistant coaching staff or the head coach in waiting that they might be grooming. That's something that needs to be negotiated. Lindy Ruff got the job done that he was hired 2 years ago and really overperformed, I think, in that regard. So how much leverage does that create for his salary and number of years on the contract and say over the roster, say over his coaching staff? And who's he negotiating this contract with? Is he negotiating with Terry Pegula? Is he negotiating with Jarmo Kekalainen, Pete Gwelly, the mix of the group? Is it something like, the Bills situation? I don't know if that's going to influence how the Sabres are run, but the Bills just had a coaching change and a restructuring of the general manager's power and his role and who was involved in that coaching hire, and will that influence how the Sabres proceed in that regard this offseason? So I do expect Lindy Ruff. I think he will be the coach of the Buffalo Sabres next year, but there's business to be done to get to that point as to what that looks like on paper and the business of hockey and how they get to that point.
Any other Sabres thoughts before we move on to the Bills schedule?
I think just goaltending. Is are the Sabres going to get the boost that they've gotten from changing goalies twice already in this playoffs? Once with Alex Lyon coming in for Luukkonen and really turning around that series and turning that series in the Sabres' favor, and the Sabres getting a good performance out of UPL and good defense and a ton of block shots and a real season-saving effort in Game 4. Can they get that again in Game 6 to push this to Game 7? Is the length of the season, fatigue, playing every other day, catching up to the Sabres at all, and the goaltending and specifically, but with rotating the goalies, does going to somebody else help the Sabres? Can they expect this to keep happening with Alex Lyon, where he comes in and is tremendous off the bench and in relief? But I think this is a successful season already. But I think this is really a successful season if the Sabres can pull out one more victory and get to Game 7 and get to that moment, and anything can happen. So can they get the one more season-saving performance from Alex Lyon and the defense and this team on the road, and then see what happens Monday night?
If Alex Lyon is able to have a nice game, although it always depends on how it happens. Alex Lyon could have a mediocre game and the Sabres can still win. But if Alex Lyon plays strong, then what do you do in Game 7? I guess you got to go back to him, right? Even though the whole thing about the rotation and I don't know. I guess if Lindy Ruff really did want to rotate, then he would have had Alex Lyon starting for UPL in Game 5. Which I thought might have been the thing, but
If Lindy
both
Ruff
are
really
defensible.
if Lindy Ruff really wanted to rotate the way the Sabres did throughout the season, then Colton Ellis would be starting Game 6. I don't think that's going to be the play, but that's the rotation the Sabres went to. It was kind of UPL Lyon, Ellis every once in a while, and he hasn't played yet in the playoffs. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but that would be a real wild card move. Is there another
Yeah, it
lineup
would.
move? Is there another lineup move that Lindy Ruff can play? His lineup tweaks worked for Game 4, seemed to work for one period of Game 5, and even Konsta Helenius coming into the lineup seemed like a plus move, even though it didn't result in the Game 5 victory. But is there another tweak, another move? He shifted the top line around, separating Tuck and Thompson, or putting Benson or Doan onto that top line to get something going might be a move that they make.
Bill's schedule came out last night also, right around the second period, I think, when the Sabres were playing the Canadiens. And two things stood out to me regarding the way it all shook out. And that is that it is front loaded with really good teams, and the holidays are going to be grueling for the Bills and first year coach Joe Brady. Now, the Bills are favored to win each of these games, or all but three of these games, I should say, in the offseason or the way too early spreads that these sports books put out. But the two things that stood out to me regarding the front end and the back end: number one, they start at Houston, a place that Josh Allen has never won and was sacked 8 times, hit 4 other times. You had to practically scrape him off the field with a spatula last season. And that's who Josh Allen gets to start the year with. And Joe Brady's going to have his head spinning doing his first work in the regular season on the sideline, as opposed to being up in the booth calling plays. He's got to manage his entire team. And then short week against the Lions for the debut of Highmark Stadium, the regular season debut, that is, the first real game to be played there. And then the opponents after that are the Chargers, the Patriots, and then at the Rams on Monday night. So 4 playoff teams among the first 5 opponents, and the outlier in that 5 is the Detroit Lions, who a lot of people, including myself, considered a Super Bowl contender heading into just last season. They had a fantastic 2024. And so if that's maybe your quote unquote easiest opponent to start the season, that's a tough haul. And then from Thanksgiving on, it is Kansas City, at the Patriots, at Green Bay. This is December 13th at Lambeau Field, by the way. So weather could be a serious issue. That's Sunday night football. Saturday against Chicago at home. And then Friday at Denver at Mile High Altitude on Christmas Day. So in that mix, you have weird days games, short week games, weather games, altitude games, holiday games, and all of those teams, playoff teams from last year, or actually not Kansas City, sorry, but just not Kansas City, just happens to be Buffalo's arch rival, I think, in the grand scheme of things. That is a rough stretch before the Bills finish at Miami. Soft touch of an opponent, but still at Miami. So that's more travel. And then at home against the Jets to finish out the regular season. The Bills, I think there are only 5 teams. No, hang on a second. Because the Bills, I guess let me pull it up and then I'll have it for sure. But the Bills last year played 1 game outside of the Eastern time zone, and that's when they went to Houston. This year, they play only 3 games, road games inside the Eastern time zone, and those are just the division games. That's Miami, New England, and the New York Jets. This year, 8 teams will play an international game this year and not travel as many miles this year as the Bills. Now, that doesn't factor in the fact that the Bills are probably going to stay out west in between weeks 5 and 6 when they play the Rams on Monday night and then the Raiders on Sunday, right before their bye week. But that's still another logistical issue that first-year head coach Joe Brady is going to have to navigate, keeping his team away from home for a week, practicing at somebody else's facility, living out of a hotels. Again, these are grown-ups, professional athletes, finely tuned bodies. There will be dietitians and nutritionists and physical therapists and doctors and all kinds of people there ready to keep a schedule for them and hold their hand. But still, this is a lot. This is a lot to handle. And I think it was one of Sean McDermott's strengths was dealing with all this stuff, the London game against Jacksonville excluded, but dealing with the snow, sending a game to Detroit, or weather games and all this other stuff, games being pushed back and all that crap. But Joe Brady, we're going to see how his support staff and he can handle this.
Yeah, well, I think you laid out that, there's a lot of difficulty to this schedule. I think if you just go purely on 2025 winning percentage, I think I saw the Bills are tied for the eighth most difficult schedule in the league. But with teams like the Lions, the Chiefs, the Ravens, underachieving last season, I think being better than their records were, and we expect at least some of those teams to be better this season. That makes the schedule even more difficult than it ranks on paper. And all that stuff isn't translated year to year, but if you just look at it and you named a lot of the teams, they look like a lot of either playoff teams or teams we expect to be in contention for the playoffs, other than the Jets and the Dolphins twice each. There don't seem to be too many easy opponents. The Raiders might be one of those easier opponents, but as you mentioned, that's a short week. They're going to be, even if they stay out there and avoid the back-to-back plane trips, they're going to be, at the end of a 2-week road trip away from home. With the bye week coming up, there's a lot of trap game potential there, and it's still a short week of preparation and practice and game planning coming off a Monday night road game, so it'll be, well into Tuesday morning Eastern time zone before they're able to shift into that next week there. And, they only have 8 home games, 9 road games. The Bills had one of the easiest schedules in the league last year, both at this time of the year and as the season played out.
The
And they won
final,
12
just
games.
to that point, just to state for the record, Buffalo, based on at the end of the season, when you look back on everybody's win-loss record, Buffalo had the 6th easiest schedule based on last year's win-loss records. This year, now not based on records because that's a fool's errand, but a more accurate, and check out Warren Sharp, who's a fantastic NFL analyst. But what he uses for his prognostications are the Vegas win totals, which have a much more accurate forecast based on expectation. And the Bills this year have the 14th easiest schedule. So they've slid back to the middle of the pack in terms of what they have, but then you put the mileage on top of it, and I think that's a bit of a double whammy. I think that
Yeah.
compounds just the difficulty.
14th is right in the middle of the league, but just
But
looking at
then
the
you throw the
schedule,
mileage on top of it and having to crisscross the
yeah,
country so much, and the weather games and the holidays and all 6 primetime games.
yeah, the short weeks, and they don't have a lot of rest disadvantage games with the opponent that they're playing, but they still have weeks where, their preparation is going to be condensed and healing time coming off injuries. Players might get dinged up and have less time to be available for the next game. Every NFL team deals with some of that, but with the Bills having one of the easier schedules a year ago and going 12-5, uh, maybe you can see some ways where they improve the roster, or I think they're about the same. I do think they have what it takes, especially with Josh Allen at quarterback, to overcome some of this and be a winning team and a playoff contending team. But it's really hard to see them being better than last year's team against this schedule, or even as good. And I think I saw the over-under is 10.5 games, and that's right around where I expect the Bills to be, 10 or 11 wins, kind of depending on how, the season goes with health and injuries in those last few games, and the opponents that they're playing, and how badly they need to win.
I picked them to go 12-5, and that's based on Josh Allen. I think that I know that that's a simplistic way to look at things, but that's generally how the NFL shakes out: is your elite quarterback transcends all the other little things that you look at. You just hope that self-inflicted mistakes from the coaching staff or a major injury doesn't, those things, everything goes out the window when that happens. But so the Bills, because of all the spreads are out, I mentioned earlier, they are favored in all but 3 games. And if you listen to my show on WGR, you know the answer to this question. But Jonah, did you happen to listen today? Do you know the answer? Do you want to guess?
No, I've been here on WIVB Plus channels breaking down the schedule, talking about
Okay,
the
maybe those
Sabres.
out there listening to
But
the podcast, you can guess along with Jonah here. What are the 3 games that they are not favored?
I'm going to guess at Green Bay.
Correct.
I got to think these are all road games. Um, am I cheating if I look at the schedule?
No, you can look at the schedule for sure.
At Green Bay, at New England, and at LA Rams.
That's right.
Those would be
That's
those are my
right.
guess.
I thought it could be at Denver, but They did just beat the Bills in Denver a few months ago,
Who was
but
favored
it
in
was
that
that
game?
close.
What was this? Do you remember who was favored in that playoff game?
Nah, probably the
Yeah.
Bills. Probably the Bills, but I don't remember. I'm also surprised in the line. Their spread has shrunk already, but the opening line on week one against the Texans was 2.5. And that's a team that just beat the Bills in November and dominated. And the Bills just looked totally bewildered and unable to solve the Texans defense, which, believe it or not, has somehow gotten better. They signed Reed Blankenship at safety to make that position better, and they drafted Caden McDonald from Ohio State, a player that a lot of Bills fans wanted to plug the middle. So they get a day one starter in the draft and a better safety to go with all their other all pros and pro bowlers and Super Bowl winners and all that. And I just would, and the fact that the game is in Houston, Josh Allen's never won there. Anyways, it's now 1.5. So enough people bet it right away that the line is, or the spread has shifted. But I was surprised. I would think that Houston would be favored in that game. But again, a lot in Las Vegas comes down to what I was saying. It's the quarterback, and Las Vegas is built on getting these numbers right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jonah, anything else you want to get to before we wrap it up?
I have a little bit of a conversation on the schedule because I think, we already know the opponents as soon as the season ends and,
Right.
Who's on the road and who's at home and how that breaks out. So, I think when the schedule gets released this time of year, it's really about the fan experience and the entertainment and what weeks, what holidays the Bills are playing on. The first game the first game at the new Highmark Stadium is going to be August 15th in the preseason against the Carolina Panthers. They're going to play another preseason game against the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 3 of the preseason, which will be, third stringers on both sides. And then they will play the first regular season game in week 2. Not every Bills fan is happy about that being a Thursday night game. Bills
Right.
fans who are not in Buffalo will have to watch that game on Amazon Prime. That's not
Hey, what a
something that
stress
everybody's thrilled
test
about.
that is going to be on a Thursday night, dealing with people coming home from work, rush hour traffic, trying to get to the stadium, not knowing. Again, you're going to have a couple of dry runs in the preseason with those games against Carolina and Pittsburgh. But where am I supposed to park? Heading down Big Tree Road, thinking you know where you're going, and then a cop telling you, no, you cannot go this way. You got to go this way. You got to turn right instead of turning left, or this is blocked off, or this just last season was a way you could go, but now it's a parking lot and we're under construction, and it's going to be a mess. It'll be a colossal mess, I think, on that Thursday, and probably on a lot of days until we get our routines down.
Yeah, and for the people that wanted to make this a all day tailgate or an all weekend tailgate, that would have been a lot easier to do on a Sunday afternoon or even a Sunday night game. Now you're going to have to take off work, or you might not be able to do what you wanted to do, or you might even need to take off Thursday and Friday or Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to experience this in the way that some people had planned to do on a Sunday. A week 2 Thursday night football game seems to be the ideal time slot for the NFL and the national audience and Amazon Prime television partner. And I'm sure they really wanted to send Ryan Fitzpatrick here for the first regular season game at the new Highmark Stadium. And it's not at all the ideal for the Bills fans and what they wanted for that first regular season home game. Now, it won't be the first time the Bills play in that stadium. It certainly won't be the last time. There'll be plenty of Sunday afternoon and other tailgating experiences. But I think there's similar conversations about the Thanksgiving night game and even the Bills playing on the road on Christmas. There's reasons why that's really exciting. And if you're staying home and watching the game on television, or you're an NFL fan, or you're a Bills fan that doesn't live in Buffalo, you might really like that they're in one of these primetime standalone windows. But if you're going to the game or you have plans to go to Bills road games in Denver or different cities, some of those holidays and the flights and the traveling make it more difficult. The game against the Rams is on a holiday weekend in October. That might make it easier to get a day off from work to go to that Monday night game, but it also might make it more expensive to fly out or fly back from Los Angeles. I don't think Bills fans really have the luxury of flying to Los Angeles and staying on the West Coast and then going to Vegas. So if you plan on going to either of those
Right.
games, it might be harder to do that, or you got to pick one or the other. So yeah, when the schedule comes out, I think this is a lot about fans and going to games on the road or at home or different conflicts. And I'm not so sure that the Bills got the schedule that fits the fans as well as, I think if the fans could have made their perfect schedule, fantasy booking the schedule, it would have looked a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that Denver's a fun town to go to, but you're not going to do that on Christmas. Yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
great.
And I mean, this is a very niche group of people, but I do know some people, and I think even some listeners. If you're a Detroit Lions fan and you really wanted to see Detroit play at Buffalo, that first game being the week 2 game, that Lions game being the first game at the new Highmark Stadium has made that a really, really expensive ticket. If you're a Lions fan and you want to go to that game, you would have much rather seen that game scheduled for November or December. Now it's going to be much harder to get the ticket, much more expensive to get the ticket. So yeah, just little things. I don't know what the ideal schedule would have been, but I think it would have looked a little bit different.
All
Thanksgiving is
right.
going to be very interesting. The people who, do the turkey trot or play in turkey bowl football games early in the day, and what your Thanksgiving dinner is going to look like. It might be really cool to have Thanksgiving dinner and watch the game at home with your family. But if you're going to the game, now your Thanksgiving dinner might be in the tailgate parking lot, so you're having Thanksgiving brunch before you go into the game, or completely changing your family traditions for this football game. Oh, one more thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, the this, I explained this on WIB Plus today to Carl Jones, who wasn't aware of this, but traditionally in Western New York, the Harvard Cup championship game was always played on Thanksgiving. There's no more Harvard Cup championship game because there's no more Harvard Cup. Well, there is a Harvard Cup, I think, regular season league, but they're in Section 6 and things like that. There is no more Harvard Cup. There's a Yale Cup, but no more Harvard Cup. But I think it would be really cool if the Bills have played on Thanksgiving before, but I do believe this is the first home game on Thanksgiving, or the first time since maybe AFL days that they're playing a home game on Thanksgiving. That if they did some kind of acknowledgement of the Harvard Cup history, or the best team in the city this year, or some kind of work that history into this home game at Highmark Stadium on Thanksgiving Day, would be kind of neat if, anybody with the Bills is listening to this, if Terry Pagula is listening to this podcast and wants to jot down any ideas for promoting that game.
I think the Bills, from what I'm hearing, they're just trying to keep their heads above water with everything that's
Yeah.
happening, coming fast, especially as deadlines are nearing regarding opening of the stadium and making all these switches and all the new people in the organization and leadership. And yeah, I don't know if the little things like that, maybe they'll catch up and be able to, feel a little bit more comfortable in their skin by November, and that's probably something you could put together a little last minute. Maybe. I don't know. Jonah,
One
thanks
more
for
thing.
this.
Let me just
Yes,
say this real
yes.
quick. Bills on the road the weekend in November when the high school football games are scheduled to be played. So if that were to have been a factor, if, Section 6 could have waited until after the schedule came out and worked that deal at all differently, it did happen that that field is not in use that weekend.
Ah, well, the Bills might also want to see how that grass handles things. Might need that week off, especially with this being a new venture and how late fall, early winter is on grass, and however much fertilizer they're pumping into this thing and overwatering and doing whatever they can to keep it green. Maybe they just want to give it a rest. But yeah, we'll never know. Jonah, thanks for this. Thanks to everybody out there for watching and listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Please like us, follow us, rate us, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, all the different things that you can do. Gives us a nice boost on all the different platforms, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. And buy shirts.
Yeah, and
That's
check out
another way you
Homage. Oh,
can
by the
support
way,
us now. Yeah.
some other things. I like exploring the site while we're sitting here on it. They have Grateful Dead, they have Star Wars, they have Harry Potter. These are all licensings licenses that they have. WWE. I mean, this is a ton of stuff. The bundles that you can get buy 3, get 25% off. I think you get 15% off just for signing up for their newsletter. A lot of pop culture stuff. Anyways, check it out. We were customers before we had the partnership with them. So take our word for it. We wouldn't lie to you.